Hello and welcome to LSAT Logic Applied. I'm your host, Andrew Leahy, an assistant teaching professor of law at Drexel Klein School of Law. This is a short format podcast where I take the tools from LSAT logical reasoning, assumptions, flaws, causation, strength, and weaken, and apply them to real-world claims in the news, politics, and advertising. For those that don't know, the LSAT is the law school admission test, a standardized exam designed to assess logical reasoning, analytical thinking, and reading comprehension for law school applicants. It's a high-stakes test with a unique focus on how arguments work and how they fall apart. The LSAT is owned and administered by the Law School Admission Council, or LSAC. I don't claim any affiliation or ownership. I'm just here to teach the logic. You don't need to be studying for the LSAT to follow along. The point here is to learn how to spot weak reasoning in everyday life, the same kind of reasoning the LSAT trains you to attack under time pressure. Today's episode is about necessary assumptions, the unstated ideas an argument must rely on to reach its conclusion, even if no one ever says them out loud. A recent analysis of FTC v. Meta in ProMarket magazine argues that the case should fundamentally reshape how we think about First Amendment protections for social media platforms. By way of brief background, the case at the center of this episode is FTC v. Meta, an antitrust lawsuit in which the Federal Trade Commission argued that Meta illegally maintained a monopoly in, quote, personal social networking by acquiring Instagram and WhatsApp. After a full trial, Judge James Boasberg rejected the FTC's case, largely because the market the agency described no longer matches how social media actually operates. The court found that Meta's platforms have shifted away from showing users content from friends and family and toward algorithmically selected content from creators, advertisers, and strangers. The dominant business metric is now, quote, time spent, because time on platform directly drives advertising revenue. As a result, Facebook and Instagram increasingly resemble platforms like TikTok and YouTube, competing not on social connection, but on engagement optimization. These factual findings matter beyond antitrust because they intersect with a First Amendment debate framed by a case called Moody v. NetChoice. In Moody, the Supreme Court treated social media platforms as either common carriers that neutrally transmit speech or as editors exercising protected editorial discretion. The Meta opinion complicates that binary by suggesting platforms are neither neutral conduits nor traditional editors, but commercial systems designed to extract attention from viewers. That sets up the logical question at the heart of our episode today. If platforms primarily optimize engagement to sell ads rather than exercise expressive judgment, should regulation of those systems be treated as censorship or as regulation of commercial conduct? The claim is that courts have been stuck in this wrong framework, treating platforms as either neutral conduits or editorial speakers, and that the factual record in the Meta case shows something different entirely is going on. According to the argument, modern social media platforms no longer function primarily as tools for users to communicate with one another. Instead, they function as engagement optimization machines designed to maximize time on platform and advertising revenue. And from that factual shift, the author of the ProMarket piece draws a legal conclusion. Regulation of these platforms should be treated as regulation of commercial conduct, not protected editorial speech, because it's not editorial speech anymore. So let's slow that down and ask the LSAT question. Breaking it down LSAT style, we have a conclusion. The conclusion is regulation of engagement optimization algorithms on social media platforms should be treated as regulation of commercial conduct, not as a restriction on protected editorial speech under the First Amendment. And the premises to reach that conclusion are: social media platforms no longer primarily show users content from friends or chosen connections. Algorithms now optimize for engagement and time on the platform. Time on platform is a proxy for advertising revenue. And these algorithms are largely indifferent to the meaning or viewpoint of the content. At first glance, this might all sound pretty tight. There's a lot of data, a lot of facts, and a lot of legal doctrine. But on the LSAT, that's exactly when you should start to get suspicious. Let's use an LSAT lens for this claim. This is, at base, a necessary assumption argument. On the LSAT, the question would look like this. The argument depends on which of the following assumptions. And here's the key move the author makes without ever stating it explicitly. That when content selection decisions are driven primarily by engagement and revenue optimization rather than expressive judgment, those decisions are not entitled to full First Amendment editorial protection. That assumption has to be true for the conclusion to work. And here's how we know it's necessary: the negation test. If it were not true, if engagement-driven, revenue-maximizing algorithms still qualified as protected editorial judgment, then the entire conclusion collapses. You don't get intermediate scrutiny, you don't get commercial conduct regulation, you're right back in full First Amendment territory. That's classic LSAT necessary assumption logic. Unstated, doing essential work, and easy to miss because it's buried under what seems like complex facts. So what's missing? What would boost or bust this argument? Let's do what the LSAT trains you to do next and ask, what would strengthen this argument? So there are several things that might strengthen this argument. First, evidence that courts already distinguish between expressive editorial judgment and profit-maximizing automation. Second, precedent treating similar optimization systems as conduct rather than speech. Or third, proof that engagement algorithms operate independently of human editorial intent. And what might undermine this argument further? First, evidence that editorial discretion includes profit-driven optimization, case law treating algorithmic ranking as core protected speech, or proof that engagement algorithms are designed to advance expressive goals, not just revenue. So an LSAT weaken question might ask which of the following, if true, most undermines the argument. A strong answer would say something like, courts have consistently held that content ranking algorithms are protected editorial judgments regardless of their commercial motivation. That single fact would punch a hole straight through the conclusion. And this is a great example of how smart, sophisticated arguments often turn on a single hidden assumption. The article isn't wrong because it lacks facts. It isn't wrong because it's sloppy. If it fails because of what it quietly depends on. And that's exactly what the LSAT trains you to see. Not what sounds persuasive, but what has to be true for an argument to work. Thanks for listening to LSAT Logic Applied. If you like this breakdown, subscribe for more short episodes where we apply clean logic to messy headlines. See you next time.